increasing, which is great to see. So we're speeding over 100, which is fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the intro and get things started. So greetings, everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in once again to another of our Dream Destination webinars. Today we are taking a wonderful trip through the country where it all began for Rockjumper. And still today, many of our guides and office staff are based here in sunny South Africa. You'll immediately notice that Nikki's not with us today. She's has another engagement, but we are very happy to have George Armistead with us in her absence. Right, on to our guest speaker today. Greg, it's really great to have you back with us again. And Greg is one of South Africa's, one of Rockjumper South Africa-based guides who resides down here in Cape Town with me, and who is now also a familiar face on our Dream Destinations webinar series, having touched a little on South Africa back in July last year, when Greg showcased one of the world's premier national parks, Kruger. And more recently, in December last year, Greg gave us an incredible overview of Madagascar, with all its unbelievable lemurs and ground rollers, ascites, and other amazing wildlife. Today, however, it is all about South Africa, and what's more, it is also our milestone 30th webinar. Thank you so much to every single one of you for tuning in, and whether you've attended just one webinar or seen all 30 of them, we would like to send out a massive thank you from all of us here at Team Rockjumper. So, as with all previous webinars, there's a chat box and a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to send in any questions you may have, and we'll answer as many of those as possible during our Q&A session at the end of the webinar, which George will be facilitating with Greg. So on that note, the virtual floor is all yours, Greg.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, George. And good evening and welcome, everybody. So being my home country, I've got to love this place, and hopefully I'll do it some justice. Welcome to South Africa, the apex of African birding. So start just looking at the world map at the moment. If you look to the world map, North America, obviously out on my left-hand side, Africa in the center, and you can see South Africa highlighted in blue. I'm going to just right on the, and then with our national flag, which came in as we did the breakup of apartheid, we've got the whole country covered out here. And then in the middle, a small little black hood sits in the middle of our map, and that is Lesotho, which is often counted as part of South Africa, although it is a separate country, completely landlocked by South Africa itself. There are 865 species currently in South Africa. That's including all vagrants and rarities that have been seen here. 18 of those are endemic. Now that might not seem like a lot, but we have the highest endemism rate in Africa, just ahead of Ethiopia. There are 50 near endemics. 20 of those are restricted to South Africa, Lesotho, and Swaziland. And then there are 30 species with 70% of their range within South Africa. We have one breeding near endemic, and there are also 103 globally threatened species. 5 of them critically endangered, 22 are endangered, 30 are vulnerable, and there are 46 near threatened species. Our key groups from the country would be the sugarbirds, of which we have 2 species that we see regularly, the 2 rock jumpers as well. These make an endemic family to southern Africa, although 2 of the species, one sugarbird and one rock jumper, are found solely in South Africa. There are 7 regularly seen albatross species. There are 10 korhans and bustards, 12 owls. For everyone that loves cisticolas and larks, we have 12 cisticolas, 25 larks, and 55 different raptors that we'll see regularly. We also have a great deal of mammals as well, with some great biomes to visit. You get to see quite a few. There are approximately 243 individual species, dependent now on phylogenetic research and discoveries. 9 species are endemic. Of course, we share a lot with East Africa and Central Africa, but we have all the major mammal groups represented: the bats and Chiroptera, the Artiodactyla, the even-toed ungulates, the Perissodactyla, the odd-toed ungulates, primates being monkeys, galagos, and baboons, the carnivores, our cats and our dogs, obviously we have some pretty big ones there, and then proboscidae, the elephants, our biggest mammal that we have. So how we're going to explore this today is basically looking at the biomes in South Africa. Now this is just a map of all the biomes molded together into a single view. I'm going to take each one of these apart as we go through our biomes today. We're going to start with the savanna biome. Now this is a biome where I started my work as a guide many years ago up in the Kruger National Park. The biome itself covers much of the east and central part of South Africa, right up to the northeastern border, and then down and through into the central Northern Cape and Northwest Province, up into the Kalahari Transfrontier Park, and further into Namibia and Botswana. It is the largest biome in Southern Africa, covering 46% of our land area. Its characteristics are a grassy ground layer, woody plant upper strata, and it contains almost all the types of soils that you can find in Africa. There are two zones that locally are known as shrub veld. This is where you have an upper layer that is very near the ground and shows very little in the way of grass cover. It's quite dense and difficult to get through. And then another one that you'll hear your guides constantly talk about is the bush veld. We visit the bush veld. This is in the Kruger National region. It's normally where you have a woodland which dominates your particular habitat. This particular area can go anywhere from sea level to about 2,000 meters above sea level, and roughly about 6,560 feet. It is a summer rainfall region and receives about 235 to 1,000 millimeters of rain per annum, which is more or less 9 to 39 inches of rain each season. However, this is insufficient for it to become a forest, and as a result, that lack of rain allows grasses to dominate in these habitats, and the continuous grazing and fires keep the wooded habitat back a little bit, so you have this mixture of habitat. This is a typical view of the habitat that you'll get. This is taken in Kruger National Park. Some acacia species in the foreground with a lot of nice wooded habitat all around it, and then the nice grassy understory. Coming in, we start immediately with the vultures. Our vultures have unfortunately been down or uplisted recently to critically endangered for a couple of them, and this is one of them. The hooded vulture population has declined by as much as 77% over the last 10 years. Poisoning, both direct and indirect, is responsible for a lot of the death, and then also persecution and the illegal trade in parts of vultures for the local traditional medicines is responsible. For a couple of these vultures, they believe that poaching one of these and removing its brain will give you foresight to the future. So that a few traditional healers of dubious origin will give an individual a vulture's brain, and let's say, for example, you wish to win the lottery. They give you the brain, you put it underneath your pillow, and that night you're supposed to dream about your lotto numbers, and as a result, you should then win the lottery. It doesn't work, unfortunately, and as a result, our vultures are being decimated. Another reason with the poisoning, with the rhino poaching that has been going on, they poison the rhino carcasses and also any other poached animals, normally with a poison called temic. And as the vultures come into land, they touch it and they end up dying. And we are having mass die-offs in excess of 500 to 1,000 birds at a single carcass in some cases. All right. They are the bottom part of the feeding hierarchy at a carcass. So basically, your bigger vultures arrive and these guys come in last and they pick out all the little bits between the rib cage, between the joints, the teeth, and their beak is a good indication of exactly what they eat. Moving on, one of the more common species we see is a white-backed vulture. He's also been uplisted to critically endangered, and as well poisoning and electrocution has been a result of that upgrading. They are secondary feeders at the carcass, so normally your lappet-faced and white-headed vultures come in first, and then these guys come in afterwards, and they go after the visceral, soft organs that they can get to. The bill is not as strong as a lappet-faced, for example, which opens up the carcass. What these guys do though, for us as birders and also mammal watchers, is they watch large land-based carnivores like your lions, and they also watch other vultures with incredible binocular vision. If they see a vulture circling and going down to a kill, they will immediately move into that area, and then you get your nice whole windmill of vultures coming down to get into those kills. They're also dominant over any smaller vultures. So if you get a Cape vulture or a hooded vulture, they'll move them away, and occasionally they can actually get the better of a white-headed vulture. They rarely will make their own kills, but they are known to take young springbok and warthog as well. And in a 5-minute session at a carcass, they can consume about 1 kilogram or about 2 pounds of meat from that carcass. The white-headed vulture, another critically endangered species of this biome, their reduction of population is as a result of a loss of medium and large hoof mammals and poisoning, which are the main threats to them. They are normally the first to arrive at a carcass and are only really submissive to lappet-faced vultures. Their bill and their head is strong enough to start opening a carcass at the softer material, but they generally tend to stand back and allow all the other vultures to get involved first, and then they go in and they take their little bits and pieces. And they're regularly recorded taking small mammals, reptiles, and birds. So we now move on to our largest vulture in the area, the lappet-faced vulture. He's ugly, but he's beautifully ugly. They're dominant at kills, and you can see that incredibly heavy bill. They get down to a kill, and they immediately open up the carcass, and they eat skin, tendons, and ligaments, the type of stuff that the other vultures do not have the ability to break down. So they basically get in there immediately, and they are currently regarded as near threatened. Of course, in the savanna biome, there's a few mammals to have a look out for. And I thought I'd get you started earlier with the only social cat known to man, the lion. They can exist in prides of up to 30 individuals. On the left hand of the screen, you've got a nice big adult male that has a nice mane on his head. That's to protect him, particularly when they're fighting with other males so that they can't go for the throat and choke each other out, or go for the spinal column and break the spine. On the right-hand side, you've got a female. She doesn't have the mane, and she weighs about half the weight of this male. The male will be about 280 kilograms, roughly about 600 pounds, and a female roughly about 120 to 150 kilograms, dependent on your area. They are the largest terrestrial predators in Africa, and they are crepuscular and also nocturnal. So crepuscular being active in the late evening or late afternoon, early evening as the sun is setting. Now, the reason they do this is that the conditions are cooler, so they use less energy to hunt. And also, most of their prey species are diurnal, so they can't see them very well. They primarily hunt medium and large-toothed animals, anything from an impala, in fact, I've even seen them chasing a mouse, all the way through to a young elephant, and regularly taking things like giraffe. However, they also scavenge, being big and brutal. If they come across a leopard or a cheetah on a kill, they'll often chase them off and steal their kills. So in the arid part of the savanna, so looking at the Kalahari and off to the western side of South Africa, you'll start to see these guys, southern pied babblers. These guys are noisy in small groups moving about through the vegetation, and they're beautiful, as you can see. Now, these guys work together in a nesting family, so you normally got a dominant pair and then the helpers that serve and keep the youngsters fed and well looked after. After that, what then tends to happen is that these particular birds, if they have, for example, a raptor like a goshawk or something come in, they will all go and mob it. And there's actually recorded evidence of a flock of 15 of these taking on a goshawk that had caught a juvenile. And after 15 minutes being mobbed by the entire group, he let the juvenile go. So they work really well as a single group. We also get such beauties as this, the crimson-breasted shrike. Beautiful, beautiful birds, wonderful call. They got a large, heavy bill. I've seen them taking things up to the size of chameleons. And they're at home, both in trees and on the ground. And they move past the sea, despite that bright red. They'll move up a tree and disappear for a few seconds. And then the bright red suddenly shows and you're able to see it again. But they're almost always associated with very deep acacia habitats. A cool little creature to see out in these dry habitats as well is the Southern African spring hare. They're not anything else. They're not a hare, actually. However, you'll see them at night, particularly in a place like Kimberley, for example, in the central part of South Africa, under spotlight conditions, and they hop around like a kangaroo, hence the local name kangaroo rat. Now, these guys are vegetarian and often stop at tussocks of grass to feed before they hop off again at a very rapid rate. Another beauty of the dry and arid conditions is the black-faced waxbill. He is often found in conjunction with violet-eared waxbills as well. They like the more dry, arid acacia savannas, and we see them regularly feeding on seeds on the ground. Of course, this is the one I'm talking about that he joins in with, is the violet-eared waxbill. This beautiful male is often associated with 2 or 3 females, and as I say, from the side of the road, these two will often flush up while they're eating grass seeds and land on nearby acacia thickets. The violet-eared waxbill tends to spend more time in drier conditions, and in dry conditions, they will go and drink in the middle of the day, normally at a small puddle in a concealed area. This one's for Adam. I had to put it in. He's just seen his first aardvark very recently. We go to a lovely resort near Kimberley where we get to see these guys normally at midnight. But the thing is, in winter, these guys go searching for termites. And at night, termites go from the top of their mound and they move right down under the ground to avoid the cold. So the aardvark, this lovely guy, has to get himself going so that he can get to that mound early enough that he can dig it open and get to his prey species, those termites, before they get out of his reach. He uses big front heavy claws to dig out the mound, and then he sticks a long sticky tongue into the mound and he starts to pull the ants back into his mouth, which he then grinds with a very, very strong set of molars at the back of his mouth. They really are a strange looking creature. They're got sparse hairs all over them, but they're really cool to see. It's one of my favorite mammals that we pick up along our tours. Of course, this guy is also quite regularly seen in the acacia savannas and also all the way down through to the fynbos and the Cape. He's quite widely distributed. It's a chestnut-vented warbler. He's got a very good call. If you hear it, the bird will immediately respond to any fishing or anything that he decides is a threat. And very rarely does he actually pop out in the open like this one has done. This took a fair bit of time to get the photograph. I fished for about 10 minutes before he popped up. But these guys are insect eaters, so they're normally in the thicket, moving about, getting insects and the likes, and then they quickly fly between trees, and you see the rufous vent occasionally pop up. Another of our specials out in the area is a short-clawed lark. Now, this guy likes a slightly moister habitat than the others. They favor heavily grazed, disturbed grass areas near regenerating acacia species. We don't see them too regularly, but up near Machubaskloof, where it starts to get a little bit moister, near Polokwane in the northeast of the country, we start to see these guys popping up and about, and he's one of the specials. Another special going into the moist savanna is the thick-billed cuckoo. Now, these guys often are seen in the early spring and into summer, and they are seen because they get out on the top of a tree and they call. It's believed that the female that calls, and she flies over a large distance in one direction calling, and then she comes back on that same line going back to the same trees to call. It's not very easy to see them. This photograph that one of my fellow guides took is absolutely incredible. Normally you see them in a dense, thick tree, maybe part of the head and part of the neck sticking out. But you always start looking for them when you get a helmet strike, the Retz's helmet strike, which they parasitize through the Kruger National Park and further north. Of course, nobody's going to have any issues about seeing a leopard, and this particular female up in a marula tree was seen in the first minutes of the morning as the sun was just beginning to rise. Now, leopards are at home in trees. They climb very easily. They have incredible muscular ability. Their necks are so thick because they can haul an animal about 3 times their own body weight up a tree. A female leopard, about 60 kilograms worth, so about 180 to 200 pounds, is able to pull an animal about 600 pounds up into a tree vertically to get it away from hyenas. They're normally solitary, and their camouflage is incredible. Those broken rosettes literally break them up in the vegetation. You can be watching a leopard walk across the road in front of you and into the bushes next to you, and she'll stop and she vanishes in front of your eyes. I've sat with one that was 3 meters from us, and because of that really particular camouflage, we could not see her. They are really incredible creatures to see, and hopefully you get the chance to see them as well. Of course, we have a few monotypic individuals as well, and this is one of them, the hammerkop. He is quite common all the way through sub-Saharan Africa, wherever you get a wetland, and they're often found in these wetlands, hunting for frogs and small fish and things in puddles, and also take insects. You can see the very particular head shape. It looks like a hammer, and hammer in Afrikaans is hammer, and kop being head, so it's a hammerhead. Of course, another great species, they're vulnerable in South Africa, is the southern ground hornbill. I couldn't go without including these because they're really incredible birds to see. They're large, about waist high for an average adult. The large bill is used to dig up things in the ground, insects and the likes, but also as a pickaxe. He'll dig through the shells of tortoises, he'll hit the snakes that he sees on the ground in the head, and he's really particular with it. And then he can pick up a whole lot of things and carry them back to the members of his group. They're normally found in small groups of about 4 to 6 individuals. It's normally an alpha pair with their previous season's youngsters who are helping their next generation of youngsters as they move through their environment. And then another interesting mammal for the savanna biome is the African or Cape buffalo. These guys are grazers and they're predominantly nocturnal. They drink normally in the late afternoon and in the early morning, and then in the middle of the day, they sit and they ruminate, and then at night they get up and they start moving when it's cooler. Once again, it uses less energy. Unfortunately for them, they're often followed very closely by lions, and particularly in Kruger, there are some prides that specialize in hunting them. If you look at this particular photograph, the one that is in the foreground is a female. The horns are quite thin, and she doesn't have a very large, heavy boss in the middle of the head. Whereas the one that is 3 back and one that's almost second to last, standing upright with the head up in the air, they've got this very heavy horn set on the head. That is a male, and I can tell you, you don't want to encounter those in a shady alley. They are very aggressive and they will protect their herd at all costs. This herd was in the middle of the day just relaxing, ruminating after having drunk water. We then move into the grassland biome. The highland grasslands, as we refer to them, basically encompass an area that covers Johannesburg and Gauteng down into the Free State, so Kimberley, which is in the central area here, and then parts of KwaZulu-Natal into the western part of KwaZulu-Natal, up into Lesotho, and up the escarpment. Now, this is the main biome of the high central plateau. It is mainly flat with gentle undulations, and it does include the escarpment. So it does go up to 2,850 meters above sea level, or 9,350 feet. Trees are largely absent, and it is dominated by a single grass layer, basically right across the way. Unfortunately, it is also our most under threat biome because it is the best biome for monoculture. I think very much the same as a lot of other countries as well. And urbanization has also dramatically affected the habitat as people move up here looking for a nice place to build their new home or their golf establishment, any of those. This is a typical view from Wakkerstroom of the grasslands that we expect. Nice undulating plateaus, open grassland, and along the streams you get thick vegetation. And we start off almost immediately with another endemic, and this is the Boertjeslark. They are endangered and they really enjoy short upland grasses, particularly disturbed habitats. An area that we go to see these birds is often being overgrazed by cattle, and they hop around near the cattle and near dogs, just happily feeding these open patches. They also quite like burnt areas where it's easy to access food. Unfortunately, their population is declining rapidly. And in fact, on my last tour, we went to an area where we had seen these birds quite regularly. And the area that they were in has actually been taken over by housing. So the guys that are looking after these birds and doing research are constantly having to find new habitats for them as they move. Another interesting species of these highland grasslands is the ruds. Now, this is another endemic, and he's also endangered, but he likes slightly higher altitude, short, dense grasslands close to pans. Now, this is taken at an area called Particular Bird, though, is quite interesting. We had seen him move, and we went in search of him, walking in a line. And as we started coming close to the area, the guide that's local with myself said to me, something's weird, this bird isn't moving. So we stopped and we started looking. And after a short while, both of us saw this bird literally hiding underneath a tussock of grass. The grass is like that, and the bird is right at the bottom. And we just stood still because there were some other people that wanted to see it. And after about 5 minutes, with these people moving in to see this bird, it came out and moused off into the next habitat. It constantly mouses and moves quickly through these habitats, and the camouflage is incredible to hide it as it goes. The next is a yellow-breasted pipit. It is another endemic. Now, this is also found in Wackerstrom, but is found on the other side of Wackerstrom in a slightly higher elevation, where they constantly get mist and early morning rainfall. And the reason that they are up there is because they love lush montane grasslands, where they can also find their food source. They're insectivorous. Very often we see them early in the spring displaying over their habitat, and then they'll land and they'll walk down the hillside towards you. They're often associated with the small streams also in these little habitats, and they're beautiful to see. Not very often like this though. Again, one of our guides got incredibly lucky to see the bird out in the open, but we normally see decent views of them, and that yellow sticks out beautifully against the green grasses. So another beauty is the near endemic southern bald ibis. Now this guy nests up on cliff faces, and we often see them in Wackerstrom, but also when we go up Sani Pass, which I'm going to take you through just now. They nest in small colonies on the cliff faces and then descend onto these grasslands, where they use their long bill to probe into the soil. And the tip of the bill is sensitive and is able to pick up anything like earthworms and the likes on the floor. These beautiful birds move in flocks of about 10 to 15 individuals at times. Otherwise, you'll see them solitary, but they are quite nervous in certain areas. And occasionally I flush them trying to get photographs. They really are stunning birds, though. They're fantastic to see out in these habitats. And unfortunately, their population has dwindled a little bit. And I think they're now sitting at vulnerable on the red data list. An interesting mammal to see, which you won't see in Kruger, is the black wildebeest. Now, most people have been to East Africa, and if they've done South Africa, they've been into Kruger National Park, and they would have definitely seen blue wildebeest. So the blue wildebeest and the black wildebeest would naturally be able to interbreed. The lock and key mechanism and their genetics is exactly the same, and as a result, if they happen to be in the same habitat zone, they could easily mix. But these guys are separated from the blue wildebeest by the escarpment, and as a result are endemic to our highlands in the grassland areas. They are also grazers and are normally in small flocks, and the easy thing to identify them with is these small handlebar type horns off the front of the head and the long white tail. Another near endemic of the Wackerstrom grasslands and also up onto these highlands is the grey-winged francolin. You get them calling very early in the morning, often in small coveys of about 5 or 6 birds. These guys run around scratching on the ground, very much like all your other game fowl, searching for grass seeds and occasionally insects as well. But they are really, really stunning birds to see, often crossing the road in front of you. And I was really lucky with this in the early morning. It allowed me to get a good view of the neck. You can see their speckling on the base of the neck, and then this nice orange that goes around down onto the sides. Really beautiful birds. Another near endemic, up near the pipits, we often see these guys. This is the eastern long-billed lark. He's the first of our long-billed larks that we encounter normally on our tours. The bill is not as long as a Cape long-billed lark, for example, but they move on the side of the road and also down into thickets, normally around rocks, where they probe the ground looking for insects, and they don't mind burnt habitats. As you can see, this guy is out on a nice burnt tussock. They often like slightly shorter grasses in these habitats. Of course, in the grasslands, although this guy himself wasn't in the grasslands, this is a meerkat. They're really cool creatures to see, a nice little family bonded creature, normally in groups of up to about 30 individuals. They run all over the place, normally 2 or 3 sentries, watching the whole family feed in the grasslands as they dig up any insects and the likes. They're quite widespread, even out into desert biomes, but you tend to find them quite often in these grassland habitats. And if they see anything, a raptor or anything, even a jackal or something like that, they'll give an alarm call, and all of the individuals will scatter down into a hole to make sure that they can escape the predator that might be coming their way. The near endemic pied starling is also a feature of these grasslands. Like all the other starlings, he belongs in the Lamprotornis family. You can see the coloring off of him. He's got a coppery sheen. That sheen is as a result of the refraction of light, and you get a bit of green on the back and some of the copper on the wings. These guys are normally in small family groups as well, normally 4 or 5 individuals. I've seen large groups as well, up to 30 individuals in some places. They're often down on the floor looking for seeds and insects. Another near endemic, the melodious lark, is found more into the central area of South Africa, around Kimberley and Johannesburg in that area. They prefer fairly long open grassland and well-developed grass. Just recently, however, they've just found a new population where we used to have just a population in South Africa and an extant population in Zimbabwe. A new population has now been confirmed in East Africa, the scientific data of which will be released shortly. And one of our guides, Stratton Hatfield, was involved in that particular find. But yeah, these guys are often found in these grasslands, and they eat a particular seed from a grass called the red grass, the Meter trianda, and they also supplement their diet with insects. You don't normally hear them calling, and they can be quite difficult to see, but when they do call, it's normally when they're flying in their display flights above the grasslands. Now, this is a very, very special bird, and you're unlikely to see it, unfortunately, during our tours. In fact, most people are unlikely to see it. This is a white-winged flufftail, and it is a critically endangered grassland species. All right. There are less than 250 mature individuals, and this particular individual was taken in Ethiopia. But we also have an area called the Middelpunt wetland in Dulstroom, and the Middelpunt wetland was regarded as being a non-breeding area for this particular flufftail. Now, due to the decrease in their breeding habitat in Ethiopia and also the threatened habitat in the Middelpunt wetland and the rest of Dulstroom, they decided that this bird was definitely critically endangered, and research began to see how they could basically save the species. Just recently, however, camera traps are set up in the Middelpunt wetland, and they got some incredible footage that confirmed that these birds are actually breeding in South Africa as well. So we have 2 breeding populations, one in Ethiopia and one down here in South Africa. Now, Rockjumper is the species champion for this white-winged flufftail. So through BirdLife International and BirdLife South Africa, we basically provide support in the role of finances, which basically allows these guys to have a full-time monitoring and conservation project put up to save them. And it is monitored and operated through BirdLife International's Preventing Extinctions program. So it's something that's very close to our heart. And about a year and a half ago, for example, we ran a Kruger challenge where all the funds raised there went straight into this Middelpunt Wetland Trust to carry on supporting the work done to try and save these flufftails. When you look at this flufftail, you can see the white on the wing itself. That's the diagnostic feature of the flufftail. Seeing a flufftail like this obviously has to be mist netted. You're not going to see flufftails very easily. Even the easiest of flufftails sprint across a path in front of you and normally vanish after a split second. So wonderful bird to actually get a view of. Then the breeding near endemic is the South African cliff swallow. They are an intra-African migrant. They come down here for our spring and summer in large gregarious flocks where they then find a nice nest site. In this case, they nest quite commonly under bridges, and that has actually allowed their range to increase quite substantially. They can get up into flocks of 1,000 birds at these congregations as they nest. And then once they've nested and bred successfully, they then disperse for our winter all the way up to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this is the view from Sani Top in Lesotho. It's 2,876 meters above sea level. So it's something that's saying just about 10,000 feet. It is absolutely stunning. And if you look very carefully, right down to the very bottom of the valley, you can actually see the road that we follow that comes up and eventually snakes up the valley as we go. At this height, obviously, the air is quite thin, and you do get some very interesting weather phenomena. I've had thunderstorms that pass you in 20 minutes. I've had gale force winds. I've had clear, still days, but it is a really incredible view from the top. And when we do our tours, you get another country stamp going into the landlocked country of Lesotho, which is the only country landlocked by another single country. Just as you're going up towards Lesotho, you pick up these guys, the Drakensberg Rockjumper. He's a near endemic. A nice yellow wash on the chest and the very long tail will help you identify him. They are insect feeders, often moving in the thick, dense thickets. And then when they call, they pop right up onto the surface and display. They're really cute and very active little birds to view. You also may see jackal buzzards as you go up. They're quite common. You often see them flying with a very distinctive broad wing pattern. They often soar just off the cliff edges. This particular individual is a beautiful specimen with the rufous band across the chest. They often eat things like your flea rats and hyraxes, rats and the likes in your valleys. I've actually seen them take game birds as well. This guy was taken just off the edge of the mountain cliff near Sani Top. So really stunning birds. Another individual that you may see as you go along. Sorry, I'm just looking at something. The Cape rock thrush is a fantastic bird and near endemic, often found in association with rocky areas. They are insect eaters. Then you've got the Gurney sugarbird, another near endemic that is associated with your sugar plantation or your protea bushes, often feeding and taking out the seeds of the proteas. The lovely rufous chest, you'll see it, and going up Sani Pass, we get them regularly. Buff Street chats, another fantastic species, often associated with the rocks, jumping over these rocky areas and showing off beautifully. This male, absolutely stunning in coloration, is an insect feeder. And then Rockjumper's flagship species, a Drakensberg Rockjumper. The coloration of this male is during our winter months. He's quite beautiful. And they're found almost to the top of Sani Top in the alpine grasslands, moving amongst the boulders looking for insects. Then we get the small little mammal, a Sloggett's flea rat. These little guys are the only species associated with the rocky habitats in the high altitude grasslands, and they feed on grasses and often pop out when we're at the border post of Lesotho. As you go up, you also get these nice big boulders sticking out on the side, and you hear these guys, the African rock pipit. Near impossible to see, they're normally a spot just on the rocks, but they call a beautiful call in these grasslands and looking for insects. And then on Sani Top itself, we often find these near endemic mountain pipits. They are believed to be intra-African migrants, and they disperse in our winter through Botswana and Namibia, with them being recorded up as far as the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. Cape vultures also regularly seen flying over us. This individual, you can see the light colored eye. They are often nesting up on the cliffs, and they come down and eat dead donkeys, dead cows, and any dead mammals that you might get along those areas in Sani Pass. Another individual that during the summer months is up in the high altitudes. This is the sentinel rock thrush. He's near endemic, and he moves along the rocky areas in the high altitude during summer, and then moves slightly down during the winter to about the mid altitude of the Sani Pass area. The bib goes right the way down from his head, that nice gray coloring onto the rufous chest. Something that most people would love to see is another monotypic individual, the secretary bird. We get them through the grasslands quite regularly, moving freely. And then the Denham's busted as well, another beauty that comes out onto these grasslands. And we normally see them relatively close before they move off rapidly through the grasslands to get away from us. These guys take small insects, where the secretary bird is a specialist snake hunter. Back up on the cliffs, we often get the ground woodpecker. These guys are almost completely fixed on the ground and rocks. They eat ants and their pupa and larvae around the rocky areas, and even when disturbed, will flush out onto a rock top. And then a beautiful vulnerable species, the blue swallow. We often get them at their nesting sites in summer. They move down from Zimbabwe and Tanzania through to us, and they come down into South Africa and breed inside holes, almost sinkholes, under the grassy open habitats. This is a male with the beautiful long streamers. Then the blue crane is South Africa's national bird. We see them regularly throughout our tours and all the grassland habitats and the fynbos area. The tips of the wings are what you see dangling out behind them. It is not the tail, and they eat insects, and I've seen them also take small mammals as well, and they breed in marshy habitats. The grey crowned crane is an endangered species and is also found in conjunction with these other cranes. They also breed in the marshy habitats, and we almost always find them near wetlands. As are these, the wattled crane. Same type of idea, breeding near marshy habitats, riverine ecosystems, and they also hunt things like frogs, insects, and the likes. We then move on to a very special habitat. It's an 800-kilometer stretch along the Indian Ocean, and it is dominated by forest, interrupted by areas of water that control, or grassland controlled by water. So if you've got flooded grassland that has water going through it, that is where your forest will end. This is the Indian Ocean coastal belt. It is found right along the east coast from Mozambique, right the way down into the Eastern Cape. Just a good look at the area. The first species that we get in these areas, normally in the leaf thickets and the deep matter, quite a difficult bird to see and photograph, is the brown scrub robin. A beautiful song that often belies a not incredibly beautiful bird, but these guys will move along the leaf litter, flicking leaves about and taking any insects and things they find. Another beauty that you get in these sand forests, the dune forests, is a woodward's batis. It is the only batis that lacks a black band across its chest in southern Africa, and they have their habitat also just spreading right into the southern part and northern part, central part of Mozambique. This bird is quite cool. It's an African broadbill. When they fly, they mechanically make their noise. It makes a noise as he flies across his perch. They are often found in these habitats as well, normally resident, although there are some movements just slightly north into Mozambique from these habitats. Of course, African elephants, a keystone species, they move through these habitats, breaking open pathways and trees and taking out trees. They also make sure that the grasslands and forests don't get dominated by each other. The African elephant itself, their numbers have increased quite dramatically in South Africa, but through the rest of the world, there are not so many. This is a matriarchal herd with a matriarch moving in the front and then their youngsters and sub-females behind, moving to a water point. This beauty is a pink-throated twinspot. For each feather on the twinspot's body that is black, they'll have 2 white spots, hence the name twinspot. This pink-throated twinspot is often found in sand forest, normally either singly or in pairs, and they tend to stick right in the thickets, only showing very briefly for shots like this. A near threatened species that also goes up into Namibia is the Mozambique is the southern banded snake eagle. There are less than 50 pairs of these in South Africa. They're often seen perched on top of trees or up on telephone poles, utility poles, but they also tend to hide underneath the canopy. They're really good at catching snakes. You can see the legs have no feathers on them, and that's because they've got double scalation on the legs. So if they catch a snake and the snake tries to bite them, they have a chance of deflecting the bite. Another beauty, everyone wants to see them, the gorgeous bush shrike. Again, a species that likes the sand forest. They tend to hide out in the deep and give out a very particular call. And if you can get them up, you'll first see that beautiful ruby gorget coming up, and then they'll pop out into the open. These guys take anything from largish insects through to small reptiles. This guy's a difficult one to see. It's the near-guards sunbird and can be confused with the purple banded sunbird. But that broad band of red across his chest and like a dusky gray color on his stomach basically helps identify him. He is a really beautiful bird to see, often around flowering trees in the northeast of South Africa. And then another special in the area is the Rudd's apalis. That nice black band across the chest is very significant for him. There are no other apalises in that area with it, and they're often found in sand forest. Then we come across white rhinoceros quite often, grazers, bulk grazers. An individual like this is 1,800 kilograms. They can eat about 1/3 of their body weight in a single day in grass alone. These guys have been under threat through poaching, but thankfully it seems that it's slowed down through the pandemic at this point in time. They're often quite docile, and you'll see them mud wallowing occasionally as well during the middle of the day to get rid of the heat on their body. The final one for this area is the lemon-breasted canary, associated with a palm called the lala palm. They tend to eat grass seeds and then nest within the lala palm, and they are often found in these open grassland areas just next to these forests. We then move into the forest biome. This area is restricted to frost-free areas in South Africa. It receives between 525 and 1,000 millimeters of rain yearly, between 20 and 39 inches. You can see a typical Afro-montane forest in an area called Kloof that we normally venture through. And here you start to get very special species like the endemic Cape parrot. It's also endangered in South Africa. There are less than 1,000 birds. They tend to eat off of a very particular tree called the yellow, sorry, my brain's gone dead. But they take the particular fruit, they specialize in eating it. And then in the evenings, we often see them flying back to their roost site and sitting in the open forest. Another near endemic is the forest buzzard. It can be very easily mistaken with the steppe buzzard. They're often in the forest edges, and they can be quite easy to view with nice tear-like streakings down the chest. Really a beautiful bird. They hunt small reptiles and rodents. The forest canary, also another great species for these areas with the big gray ear patches across the ears, is another near endemic to the forest biome. We often see them out on the outside edges, feeding on grasses just on the transition zones. The chorister robin is a deep forest bird. We often get them just inside the forest as you're starting to enter it. It is a near endemic, and they're also insect eaters. They tend to be on the lower to mid strata of the trees, calling out loudly, and then foraging on the floor looking for the insects. Of course, we also get blue or samango monkeys. The monkeys themselves are quite shy. They tend to be quite reclusive, moving away from any activity. They often come down and feed on fruits, fresher fruit in trees, and also flowers and the likes, before moving into deeper thickets. Quite a stunning individual. They've got very long tails. Then Neisner taracos, very quick moving. Like all taracos, are agile through the trees and are fruit eaters with a very hoarse, strong call. They're also a near endemic to our environments. Then another special, these guys move as well. It's a spotted ground thrush. They're always on the ground feeding through the leaf matter, and then they nest up in about mid-level strata trees. Their movements are either north into Mozambique or down onto the coastline in KwaZulu-Natal and up into Glinza Forest, where we see them quite regularly. It's quite a difficult bird to find, normally because they tend to be on the ground under thickets. But when they move out, you can get beautiful views of them. They really are stunning and entertaining birds to watch. This is a very interesting bird. It's a green barbet, and it's one of two distinct populations that occur in Africa. The other one is the subspecies Woodwadi, which occurs in Tanzania. These guys are entirely dependent on fig fruit, and as a result, they haven't spread through the other forests of South Africa because figs are not predominant in these forests, only within one forest called the Ongwe forest, where we get to see them in South Africa. Another difficult bird to see is the eastern bronze-nape pigeon. There are not very many of them left in South Africa. In fact, in the forest that we regularly visit, the Glinza forest, they estimate that there's 4 to 6 pairs of them in that forest. This is a male with a nice white streak across the neck, and you normally see them a bit further out, just sitting out sunning in the early morning on the vegetation. The orange ground thrush, regularly seen further inland in KwaZulu-Natal. These guys tend to give a beautiful call as well in the morning, and then you'll see them moving across the floor, eating insects and also fallen fruit occasionally. This is a mouse, if ever there was one. In fact, a photograph like this is unprecedented. Normally you get an eye, a beak, a tail, a leg, and you hear the call, and that is a Barrett's warbler. So they're very difficult to see, and they're a near endemic, part of the Brodipterus family. Another special that you get also up in Kloof is the black-fronted bushshrike. They're quite shy and retiring, but they tend to spend a lot of the time in the thickets, and if they do get flushed, their flight is very heavy and direct into the next thicket to get away from you. And then a real special out here as well is a buff spotted flufftail. You normally hear them more than see them. Their call is ventriloquial. They'll call here, big booming noise, and it sounds like they're probably standing 5 meters from where they are. Really stunning birds to see. Often you only get them crossing a path, for example, in a brief glimpse. And then a green twin spot, another very beautiful twin spot. Again, the white spots and feather, 2 of them at a time. These guys are seed eaters and also insect eaters. You get them on the edges, transition zones of forests, often feeding in those areas in groups of up to about 5, 6 individuals. And then also on the forest edges is the Swee waxbill, another near endemic. This is a male with the black face mask and the red rump with the olive back. Quite commonly seen even down in the fynbos in the Western Cape. We then move into the Albany thicket, which is down on the east coast near the Eastern Cape. There's no formal thicket biome. This replaces forest and is closed evergreen shrubland. It comprised of portulaca and euphorbia as their common species of plant. You can see the euphorbias in the foreground, those tree-like looking cactus things on the edges of that forest. An endemic species to the area is the Knysna woodpecker, highly sought after, and they found all the way down the east coast, right the way down into the Western Cape in an area called De Hoop. These guys are quite difficult to find, and when you do see them, they normally give you a brief view before going back up and shooting into the canopy and along the branches looking for ants. One that's even worse, another brodipterous warbler, is the Knysna warbler. These guys, unfortunately, are now extinct off of the Cape Peninsula, but you do get them all the way from De Hoop, all the way to the East Coast as well. Normally betrayed by their call. They sound very similar to the Barrett's warbler and behave exactly the same. Then the Cape grassbird, another beauty. He's actually a cisticola. He belongs in the family of the cisticolas. He's got a long tail. He'll often tee up on top of vegetation when he's calling, and then he mouses back down into the vegetation, looking for insects and grass seeds. The southern chagre is another near endemic. So chagres are normally quite skulky species, but occasionally will pop out in the open for you to see them like this. You can see the hooked bill, so they tend to take insects and reptiles, and occasionally a few fruits as well. This is a mountain zebra, or in this case, a Cape mountain zebra. The stripe pattern is different to a plains zebra. You can see the stripes do not connect at the bottom of the stomach or down the insides of the top of the leg, unlike the plains zebra. And it's also got a slightly different body shape to them as well. These guys are grazers, only found on the Cape Peninsula, along with the mountainous ranges there. This is a Cape Batis, as another special for the area. He's a regional endemic. Also found up into parts of Zimbabwe, and they're often found in riverine streams and thickets where they're looking for insects. The southern booboo is another special of these areas. He's related to your shrikes, another insect eater with a heavy bill. They're also deep thickets feeders. They go down onto the floor and eat, but they're a little bit more confiding, often pop out into the open to allow you to view them like this. A real special of these areas is an altitudinal migrant, and a near endemic is the bush blackcap. These individuals also tend to hide in the thickets, but they'll come out quite happily to come and see what's disturbing an area. And like this individual came out quite clearly for us to view him, and he's a fruit and insect eater. And then another near endemic, surprisingly, fiscal flycatchers are also seen all along the east coast, often up on top of perches like poles and the likes, and they are insect eaters. The white striping on the wing itself doesn't go up onto the back in a V like a common fiscal. It's only on the wing panel, which is your diagnostic feature for them. Then the greater double-collared sunbird is a further near endemic to the area. The long bill designed to get into the flowers of this Cape honeysuckle, but that very broad red band on the chest is unmistakable. Really beautiful birds. And then an interesting individual is a mangrove kingfisher. They used to believe this bird would migrate in our summer up to Mozambique and then back down into KwaZulu-Natal, while some would go down into the Eastern Cape. They have now figured out that this bird breeds in the Eastern Cape and then moves up in winter to KwaZulu-Natal along those eastern coastlines and into the mangroves, where they feed on crabs and fish in these mangrove swamps. He looks very similar to a woodland kingfisher superficially, but he's lacking a black lower mandible, which separates him. We then move into probably the most special biome of all of them in this area, the endemic rich fynbos biome. There's 8,700 species of plant, 68% of which are endemic to the biome. 1/3 of all the plant species that occur in the country occur just on the 6% of the fynbos biome. They have 10 endemic bird species, and fire is a major factor in maintaining the health of this environment. You can see it occurs right across the Western Cape, right on the southwestern border of the country. And this is a picture of Roy Else, one of my favorite spots to go birding. You get this lovely fynbos right down the pathway where we go looking for another very special bird. And this is it, the Cape Rockjumper. He is an endemic to South Africa. He's part of the endemic family of rock jumpers with the Drakensberg Rockjumper, and you often get these guys hopping down the rocks right from the top of the mountain to the road that we walk down on before hopping all the way back up. This male is beautiful. The chestnut is absolutely stunning, and they're quite confiding, allow you to get incredibly close to them. We also see common hyraxes, common rock hyrax, often running along the rocks and in the open, feeding on things like leaves and leaf matter in the area. It used to be believed that they were related to elephants because of their foot structure and the fact that their testes are found deep into their body, but it is not the case. They are no longer related to elephants. They are rodents through and through. The Cape sugarbird is another endemic. In this case, he's sitting on a pincushion protea where they feed quite regularly. All of their life cycle is based on protea species. About 85% of all of their requirements come from proteas. They are also responsible for the pollination of a large percentage of the proteas that they feed on as well. The Cape bulbul, one of 3 bulbuls we get in South Africa, but this guy is an endemic with the white eye-ring, also found along these fantastic areas. They are fruit eaters. Then the Cape siskin, this guy is often on the rocks down in Roy Else. You can see the nice brown back. They get little white spots on the wings and the lemon yellow on the chest. Really stunning birds. They are seed eaters. This is non-existent. This is a button quail. I've tried this bird now 4 times. I've walked every time and seen a bird flying off in the distance as we flush on us, or at least the fynbos grasslands and restios. They like an area that has been burnt and is about 4.5 years after a burn is the particular habitat type. And if you go walking through, you may flush one, but it's almost unheard of to see a bird sitting like this. This is an incredible species to see. And really, if you get a chance and you get to see it, it'll be fantastic. The name is changing shortly. Hottentot is no longer going to exist. It is going to become a fynbos button quail, I think at the beginning of next year, due to a naming issue, but still a really great bird to see. Another beauty, the endemic orange-breasted sunbird, also found all along these proteas, but they really like heath plants. If you can find a heath, you can find an orange-breasted sunbird, often a male and female, or male and 2 females chasing each other about through these restios and occasionally perching up like this guy's doing to show off his fantastic colors. This is a Victorian's warbler, another mouse, but sometimes they come out in the open and you get to see them like this. They tend to call from the deep thicket. I've had people lying upside down under a bush looking at the rump of one of these guys as a best view, but occasionally they just happen to play the game and you see them out in the open. They're really cool birds. I've had them literally moving along the path next to me from about an arm's width away, and the call is loud and sharp and very easy to identify. They tend to move through these thickets eating many insects. Another individual that is found up on the De Hoop plains, or the Agulhas plains as you know it, what seems like desolate farmland supports Agulhas long-billed lark. They are also an endemic. And then the protea canary, associated with proteas, they tend to feed on the protea plants occasionally, but they don't necessarily depend entirely on them. They're seen quite regularly up on our tours going through areas in the succulent Karoo. Then we also see southern black korhaan, another endemic that we find quite regularly through West Coast National Park on the sandy soils in those areas. A beautiful black bird. This male is showing stunning colors. They tend to fly very easily when they get approached, and also when they hear a competitor calling, and they show these white quills on their feathers. This is a near endemic Cape spurfowl found right across the whole Cape Peninsula. It is fantastic bird to see, the largest of our spurfowls, often eating insects and the likes on the floor. And then a blesbok, in this case known as a bontebok. It is a subspecies found throughout grazing, basically throughout the grassland highlands and also through the west coast of the Cape. Another near endemic fruit eater is the Cape white-eye. As you can see, the very white ring around the eye gives it its name. We see them regularly throughout the tour in a variety of habitats. And then another near endemic, the southern double-collared sunbird, also seen quite often in flowering areas. We get them on the proteas quite often. This male shows a thinner red stripe across the chest than the greater double-collared. And then a special near endemic black harrier. These guys are often found on the west coast in the fynbos. They winter, however, in the Karoo and up in the grasslands, and they tend to take small birds and rodents. And then a cystic just one to get you going, the cloud testicular, a near endemic, and his name explains everything. When he displays, he flies right up against the sky like a black spot before descending and landing on a perch to show himself off. We can get a photograph like this. They are insect eaters. Then we also have Kruger priniers, near endemics, also found up on Lesotho. They're heavy streaking, and like all priniers, the long tail and a beautiful call. They often call from exposed perches. And then Cape Clapperlark, another near endemic, often found on the Gullis Plains and also slightly up the west coast. When they fly, literally they clap on their way up through their environment to let everyone know where they are to display. And then the near endemic Cape Weaver is also found down all the way through the grasslands and into the Forest Biome. This particular individual had just gone into breeding plumage at West Coast National Park and was feeding a chick in its nest. We then move into the succulent Karoo biome, which has gently undulating plains all the way across this northwestern border. It experiences low winter rainfall and extremely dry summer aridity. They get less than 300 millimeters or 11 inches of rain per year, and the habitat is dominated by succulent species of plants. You can see what the vegetation looks like in these open plains. And we often find just north of Cape Town into this biome is the Cape long-billed lark, another endemic species, which is restricted to this west coast. Sickle-winged chats are often found in small little family groups, 3 or 4 of them, flitting down and taking insects. They are near endemics, and they have this lovely not fishy color. It's not quite rufous, it's a salmony color on the tail before a black V. These guys are often in small family groups as well, normally adult pair with 3 or 4 helpers, the Kruger eramomala, and they are near endemics found into this succulent biome. We often get springboks. Springbok are the national antelope of South Africa, and they subsist off of these habitats and are able to survive on the succulent species of plant. This is a fairy flycatcher, often seen in the thick, dense riverbeds. We also get Karoo larks, often perching up on the top of the plant before getting onto the floor and running about, looking for seeds and insects. As I mentioned, also near endemics. And then we get large-billed larks as well, another near endemic, which will also flop down onto the floor and go and look for insects and the likes. You can see the heavier bills and the slight crest. Karoo thrushes are also found down near the riverine systems and these vegetation types. Often looking around for any fallen fruit or insects. And then the grey tit, another near endemic, often heard before seen, but they tend to perch right up on top of a piece of vegetation to show off, and you can see the nice white striping through the face and the black facial masks. This is a very difficult bird. Normally you see them a couple of meters, like 100 meters up on a cliff face, and they'll mouse down through the rock crevices. And occasionally they come down and land exactly like this individual. This is cinnamon-breasted warbler. They've got a call that only they call about every 15 minutes or so, makes it quite difficult to locate. Sometimes you have to go and climb up a set of rocks to actually see them, like this guy showed. It's a fantastic bird though. This is a Layard's warbler, like the chestnut-vented warbler earlier. He is a near endemic and an insect feeder. Then you get Namakwa warblers. The Phragmacia name is because these guys are almost entirely associated with Phragmites river reeds and are insect feeders. And then a black-headed canary. This is the Damara subspecies, normally found slightly further north. They're also near endemics and are seed eaters, often found near streams and open grasses. We then move into the Nama Karoo. This is between 500 and 2,000 meters above sea level, or 1,640 feet to 6,560 feet. They only receive up to 520 millimeters or 20 inches of rain a year, and the soils are 80% lime-rich soil. And they're mainly grassy dwarf shrublands. And you can see it occurs pretty much in the central plateau to the northwest, and its habitat is just very shrubby. This first bird you get is a red lark. It is endemic and is found on the red sand dunes and sandy plains where they have large seed grasses upon which they feed, and they're confined entirely to the Northern Cape. This is an enigma. This is a Sclater's lark. It is highly nomadic, and the easiest way to find them is to sit and wait at a water point as they come down to drink. They are near endemic, also found up into Namibia. This is another one of those migratory species. Because it's so dry, they move and are eruptive when there's rainfall, looking for grass seeds and the likes, and are also near endemic. Sorry, black-eared sparrowlark, I don't think I mentioned. The Burchell's courser is often found on open gravel plains. This guy's got himself a fantastic centipede running through. On these open gravel plains, they'll often move about early morning and then in the day go and hide in the shade of a bit of the vegetation. And then if you're lucky enough to find some water, you'll get a South African shelduck, a male on the left-hand side, a female with a white head on the right-hand side. They're dabblers, taking insects from the water surface. And then a nice special, although you get them through a lot of Africa, the Cape eagle owl is often found up in the northern section of these areas with that very blotchy pattern. It's very similar to a spotted eagle owl, but they tend to be associated more with heavy rocky mountain areas. We then move on to our final biome, the desert biome. They receive less than 100 mils of rain or 3 inches of rain a year. And it's basically dominated by bare plains and occasionally sparsy grass areas with eruptive plant growth. Just a small little patch on the very northwest corner of the map. Typical habitat, this is the Orange River Canyon that they're running along, but very dry habitat overall, or the Gariep River as it's now called. And occasionally you'll see denims busted coming into this area. They'll be feeding on insects and a few grass seeds and the likes. Sorry, big part of Ludwig's busted, called denims. Then you'll also see, if you're lucky, Barlow's lark right up to the border going into Namibia. The Barlow's lark is seen. They have a hybrid zone between the Karoo lark and this guy, but this is a pure bird with streaking just on the chest and nothing down onto the flanks, and slightly lighter in color as well. They're often found on the ground in association insects. And then the pop-eyed Stark's lark is often found as well on the sides of the road, where he erects his crest. And that you may get as well, they're completely able to because they dig the water colony too easily. We also get the Cape gannets that often come down at one of the colonies just north of Cape Town, and also at sea. They join out to go dive fishing. A specialist on the coastline is the Damara tern. Very small populations of these are found on the west coast near De Hoop, and they also are found up in Namibia where they breed. The Cape cormorant, these guys are endangered, as is the bank cormorant, and they're found in the same breeding colony very often at an area near Royals called Stony Point, and also out on a few rocks as you go out on your pelagic trips. You can see the bank cormorant, a blue lower eye with a yellow upper eye. It's the diagnostic feature of them. Then you get a few albatrosses, the Indian yellow albatross with a completely white head. All the albatross that we'll see here are endangered but are regularly seen. The shy albatross, lovely yellow tip on the bill, slightly more. Then the black-billed albatross, sorry, black-browed albatross, broad leading edge on the wing. The Atlantic yellow-nosed albatross has a nice grey colouring to the head. And if we're lucky and we find a trawler, we get all of these guys coming in, including the Cape or Pintado. They all come to get bits of the fish that gets left behind. The southern giant petrel and the northern giant petrel are also located here on this bill. And we also get white-chinned petrels often followed as we go through both in and out of our pelagics. And if we're lucky, Wilson storm petrel, one of the final species that we get to see on the tours. And it's really great being out on the sea to see these birds. I just have to give some thanks to Mike Bridgeford for his photograph of black-eared sparrowlark, Trevor Hardiker for his Barlow's lark, Hugh Chittenden for his melodious lark, African pipit, Denham's busted, Eastern bronze-necked pigeon, mangrove kingfisher, black-headed canary, red lark, and Ludwig's busted. To Sergey for his white-winged flufftail, and to Chad Cocking, my friend, for his aardvark. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic, Greg. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely stunning presentation, amazing photos, and a great overview of South Africa. I think everyone's got a great appreciation for just the volume of of very, very special species that we have in this country. A lot of endemics, a lot of near endemics, and I guess, and a lot of amazing habitat over a fair, I mean, it's a fair sized country, but over a fairly small region, it really does change very quickly. So wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thanks so much, Greg. Quickly, just before we go off to our Q&A with the double Gs, I just wanted to remind everyone that our next Dream Destination webinar is on the 3rd of March. And my brother Glenn will be back in the saddle then with a focus on a truly fabulous part of the world where incredible pheasants like tragopans and monals are the order of the day, and strange bird families like ibisbill and Przewalski's finch can be found. This is, of course, China, and more specifically the province of Sichuan, with its stunning scenery, wide open spaces, and phenomenal birding. So please do join us for that one. It's sure to be an amazing virtual experience. Just a reminder, and I know Nikki did put it up in the chat earlier on, but all these webinars are recorded and can be viewed later on, and the links will be available within the next 24 to 48 hours. You can also take a look at all of our previous webinars on the website, where you can click on the webinar tab and link through to YouTube to go and watch those. And then finally as well, the webinars are all being offered free of charge, but should you wish to donate towards our tour leaders, we have our GoFundMe link still open. And on that note, yeah, over to Greg and George for a little Q&A.
Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And yeah, thank you, Greg. That was awesome. Brought back some great memories of my trips to South Africa. And as you can see from the chat, a bunch of other folks have similar sentiments. We did get some good questions here. One from Allison Bentley was, how long a trip would we need to cover as many of the biomes of South Africa as possible? And what do you think is the best time of year to get the max level of species?
Oh, look, our comprehensive tour, I think, covers the best biomes of all in terms of time frame. I mean, you've got 18 days across most of those biomes, and you'd need to come here probably summer, so December, January, February, that period would probably get you the most species. But I mean, obviously the endemics and near endemics are always available. If you wanted to cover all biomes, of course, we've got the full mega tour. I think that now runs at 20 days now, I think, or 25 days, Keith, you correct me there.
Yeah, somewhere around there, about 24 or so.
All the biomes. Yeah. So that covers all the biomes basically across the board. And then you've got the opportunity to see everything. But yeah, just generally speaking, summer is going to be the best time to come across here. The Cape endemics are always down here, but the migrants all tend to move down. So if you're looking for maximizing your bird viewing, certainly that summer period, December, January, February, is going to be peak.
Cool. Excellent. And Elias noticed that a couple of the birds that you featured, a couple of the photos, the Rudd's lark and the Cape Rockjumper, both had rings, bands around the leg. Do you happen to know if those are a part of a particular study, or what those bands might relate to?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I've been talking to some guys just recently, particularly about Botha's lark. One of my guests had Botha's lark up in Buckersdrum, and yeah, the rings are being used to establish their range, where they're moving from their natal birthing grounds, and see how far they actually spread out, and also to try and figure out the population densities. Down here, the rock jumpers are also being studied. It's quite difficult to get to the rock jumpers in general because they tend to be right up at the high levels of some of the mountains here. And they're trying to get a good idea of how the population is moving, how they're changing with climate change and with the habitat changes, and also to get just a better understanding of their basic existence and life cycles out there. So yeah, all those birds are misnetted and are basically monitored to see what's going on. I know Roy Else here with the rock jumpers. I've run into the guys from the university probably once or twice a week when I've been down there regularly while they're busy doing their monitoring and studying of the birds, particularly to see activity around them.
Nice. That's cool. It's fun to have some context for these birds that clearly have some study. So thanks for that. We also had a question about waders and shorebirds. What is the best time of year to see local African waders?
Currently, a lot of our species that are now coming through are going to be all migrants coming in. So those will be coming down from Siberia and the likes. But if you're going to do local waders, I mean, most of our plovers and the likes are seen throughout the year. Chestnut-banded plover, three-banded plover, white-fronted plover are all regular throughout the year. But if you want the maximum wader count as you come down, you've got to be here in the peak migration season. So it's going to be that December, January, again, that period as those migrants start arriving. I know now this year, for example, just down in my neck of the woods, we've had our normal plovers and the likes, and we've also had things like sandpiper, white-rump sandpiper, pictorial sandpiper, and that's all been within about a 200-kilometer radius up and down here. So everything comes down during that migration period.
Wow, it's wild to think about white-rump sandpipers on that side of the world, but that's cool. A couple folks had asked about how our different South Africa offerings differ from one another. Maybe you can talk about the different trips and just give a quick synopsis of the focus and maybe the pace of each one.
Cool. Well, the first one that most people tend to really jump onto, particularly the early beginner birders for the most part, is the Cape and Kruger tour. The Cape and Kruger focuses on the highlights, so basically getting all the endemic Cape specials, and then also getting up to Kruger to go and get the big game animals and to get a few of those savannah specials. And then, of course, they can link that as well to going up to Victoria Falls once borders and the likes open, whenever that may be. Yeah, then you get the comprehensive tour, the Eastern Comprehensive Tour. That's a bit more intense, obviously a lot more time spent birding, trying to get those specials. Particularly along the Indian Ocean coastal belt and the Wackerstrom grasslands, and that covers a lot more of the biomes. And mammal watching does happen, but there's a bit less in the way of mammal watching because you only have Kruger for a couple of days, and there are only certain sites that you can get more mammals along the way. So generally, it's a more hardcore birding experience, and that can be linked with a 5-day trip or 5-day extension to the Western Cape to then get all your Western Cape specials and your succulent Karoo specials. So yeah, as I say, that's a bit more of a hardcore trip overall. And then you've got the mega tour, and our mega tour is focused on the hardcore lister. We stop in place to specifically focus on getting those particular species of birds. And we don't wait around for things. You get there, you bird, you try and get that species as best as possible, and then move on as soon as it's necessary.
Right on. Cool. And what about the food? Folks always like to know about the food and the meals. Are there any local specialties we sample? Are there any places along the tour routes that you particularly look forward to dining?
Yep, our food is great. I won't lie there. We probably do some of the best steaks around, and also fantastic lamb as well. Our lamb is brought in from the Karoo in this area, and it's really, really tender and cooked really well, normally with wine. So just fantastic. And then there's a great deal of seafood as well down in the Cape. They tend to do fantastic seafood dishes. And then there's a lot of local stuff, stuff that we call pup. It's basically white polenta, and you can have that served up with a nice piece of steak or something like that with a tomato and onion relish. And to complement all of that, you also get a couple of really decent bottles of wine and beer for those that would like that. But yeah, just really, really good combinations of food throughout. I reckon this is probably one of the tours that we get the best food. In fact, my weight tells me that it's definitely one of the places we get the best food along the way.
Nice. Yeah, I know Keith has worked hard on some of our birds and wine itineraries, and obviously this is a destination, Keith, where we get to show off some of the great wines of South Africa.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just touched a little heartstring there, George. Yeah, South African birds and wine trip. Oh, Amazing. No, we do. We got some amazing restaurants. I mean, we really get to sample, do some food and wine pairings, you know, get to enjoy some of our top varietals as well. Yeah, it's a good place for food and wine, as Greg said.
Nice. One last one, unless there's others coming through here, Greg, sort of a double question. Have you seen white-winged flufftail? And do you have like a bogey bird, a jinx bird that you really are after in South Africa that you're dying to see?
Let's answer the white-winged flufftail question quickly. I'm going to answer this in both the positive and the negative. A few years ago, they did a few white-winged flufftail averages. So the white-wing, they had a flufftail weekend where everyone would go across and they'd basically walk through the wetland and try and flush the bird. And as much as I've seen the bird fly away, for me, I can't take it. I've seen it, but I haven't seen it. Bogey birds, nothing's really been giving me too much of a bogey at the moment. One that really frustrates me on tour intensely in the past has been Sclater's lark. That bird I hate. Literally, I hate that bird. On my recce, I saw it like every day for 3 days. And I've done 4 significant tours up to there and not a thing. That bird just, no.
Yeah. It's like here in the U.S., the LeConte's thrasher and the mangrove cuckoo are kind of the two of the birds that drive everybody crazy. Some of those larks I know can be equally furtive and just not present when you want them to be. Cool. Well, I think that wraps up most of the Q&A. Keith, I'll turn it back over to you, and thanks again, Greg.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed having you all on, and thank you so much for everyone for sticking around, as well for the Q&A. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks' time. It's going to be a great one. China, Sichuan, and yeah, it should be really good fun. George, thanks for stepping in tonight as well. And yeah, fantastic presentation, Greg. That's 3 crackers from you now. We love it. All right. Goodbye, everyone.